Thank you very much, Michael. And I'd like to thank the Melbourne Press Club for inviting me to speak today, and thank you all for coming. I want to talk today about journalism, and television journalism in particular. Unlike some media management, I'm a chief executive who did not enter the business from an accounting or sales background. I'm a journalist and I run a business that is solely about journalism. It is a unique place in the television landscape. Even more so, Sky News is not just a journalism business. Even better for journalism and journalists, it's a strong business that has been able to constantly invest in news. However, it's not without its challenges, but more on that shortly. Our specialisation is a clear one, delivering live breaking news whenever it happens 24 hours a day, while also focusing on opinion. That's it, that's our core mission. Now, I'm not a big fan of journalism created by journalists for journalists, but I've discovered over the years that some of our colleagues are our most avid viewers. I've lost count of the number of times reporters from other media organisations have phoned me and said, "Mate, are you going to cover that media conference this morning?" Clearly, some journalists would rather sit in the office and file than jump in a cab or catch a tram. Now, I'm not saying journalists are lazy. Maybe it's about efficiency and saving the boss a cab fare, perhaps. When I joined Sky News in 1996, it was run out of a small office in an industrial park at Frenchs Forest in Sydney's north. Our neighbour, as Michael pointed out, was the Sky Racing Channel, which was then a much larger operation that backed onto our car park. The close proximity of our brands back then was a point of confusion for some. I remember during the coverage of our first federal budget, the then opposition leader Kim Beazley provided a very spirited commentary on Mr Costello's numbers and finished his live interview by saying a cheerio to the punters watching in the pubs and clubs across Australia. That was a long time ago. Back then, we were a single 24-hour news channel, a first for Australia. Today, we are located at Foxtel, Australia's biggest television centre, which houses the most advanced digital news facility in the nation and one of the most advanced in the world. In 2004, when subscription television launched digital services, we expanded to 8 simultaneous split-screen news channels, including tech story options, covering general news, business, sport and weather. And we added a unique ability to dedicate entire channel streams to important breaking news events for as long as required. For the first time, viewers could actually choose to watch the news that interested them whenever they wanted. We launched the 24-hour Sky News Business Channel in 2008, another first for Australia and still the only Sky News business channel in the world. Reports from our business channel are now not only seen in Australia, but also in major markets like the US and UK, and soon daily in mainland China, which I'll say more about in just a moment. At the start of last year, with the funding support of Foxtel and Austar, we launched Australia's first and only public affairs channel, APAC. And at the end of 2009, we launched Sky News Local, including the opening of bureaus in Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane, and the expansion of our bureaus in Melbourne and Sydney to charter a fresh course into local news to complement our national and international perspectives. In Melbourne, for example, we've established a bureau inside the Herald and Weekly Times building alongside our colleagues at the Herald Sun, launched a weekly Melbourne-produced program and have become an official emergency broadcaster after signing an MOU with the Victorian Government. Sky News today also delivers 24-hour news, business, sport and weather services to Telstra's Big Pond, Australia's largest internet service provider. In addition, Sky News is being streamed as I speak, live around the clock on the Telstra, Optus and Vodafone mobile networks. And in New Zealand, we provide a daily evening news service across that nation from our newsroom in Auckland and our political bureau in Wellington. Today, Sky News on television delivers 16 news and information channels, 24 hours a day, across Sky News National, Sky News Business, Sky News Multiview, Sky News Local and APAC. That diversity is what makes Sky News different from every other television news organisation and what will continue to make us different. Like the rest of subscription television and our major distribution partners Foxtel and Austar, Sky News is at the forefront of digital technology, investment and innovation. We were, after all, fully digital 14 years ago at inception. But technology is our servant, not our master. As I said at the outset, the heart of what we do at Sky News is journalism. And our priority will always remain breaking news and opinion. Our ongoing investment in digital innovation is only aimed at better and faster ways of gathering, preparing and delivering journalism in a complex, competitive and converging market. We continue to lead the way. For example, last month announcing Sky News on Microsoft's Xbox as part of the offering from Foxtel. From later this year, 24-hour Australian news will be available via the same remote that brings you Bionic Commando Rearm 2. That will bring quality journalism to a generation that may be shocked to discover that the real world is sometimes scarier than make-believe. There's been a lot of debate in the media this year about looming competition changes in 24-hour news. It is true that Sky News has some powerful alliances with our newspaper-based colleagues, such as News Limited, and we have access to the news resources of the 7 Network, the 9 Network and Sky News in the UK. The latter 3 organisations are controlled in turn by our owners, 7 Media Group, PBL Media and British Sky Broadcasting. But in the end, Sky News will stand or fall based on its own performance as a journalism business. We have to deliver a decent return on investment or we won't survive. Everyone here today from commercial media organisations will know exactly what I mean. Sky News is still a relatively small news organisation. As Michael pointed out, we employ 180 people and 110 of them are journalists. I'm proud that we have a ratio of more than 60% of journalists to total staff. That is something I want to protect and build on if I can. Already this year we've employed 14 additional people. There is, however, no doubt Sky News is the David versus Goliath in what some commentators view as a battle over the future of 24-hour TV news, with the imminent arrival of the ABC's 24-hour news channel. But while we occasionally bump into the ABC, we are in fact travelling down a very different road. They will be a single 24-hour news channel. We are 16 simultaneous television news channel streams delivering across news genres around the clock. They are free to air. We are subscription. They are taxpayer funded. We live by the sword of the market. There is no doubt the ABC can hurt us if it wants to by using its power to deny us content and by campaigning against us using its massive network of television, radio, online and publicity resources. I can't see any good coming out of reducing media diversity in this way. I hope the ABC's 24-hour news channel and Sky News can compete in a way that grows journalism. Sky News is not obsessed by TV ratings points. We are focused on delivering clear, concise, accurate news around the clock and insightful opinion with choice, convenience and value to our subscribers. Our viewers are our customers and we will always strive to deliver them quality and breadth they won't get anywhere else. Take our political coverage, for example. The steady rise in prominence and credibility of our Canberra team led by David Spears, Kieran Gilbert, Ashley Gillen and now David Lipson shows how effective a skilled unit can be compared with an army. Over the past decade, it may surprise you to know that only one television broadcaster has delivered live coverage of every federal, state and territory election across all of Australia. That's Sky News. And we'll be raising the bar again with dedicated channels during the coming Victorian, federal and New South Wales campaigns. We've always had a special relationship with politicians. During the early years in Frenchs Forest, some politicians regularly arrived unannounced and uninvited, saying they happened to be in the neighbourhood and thought they'd drop by for a chat with us, despite the fact that we were way far away from the CBD and on the wrong side of the city for the airport. Sometimes I'd turn around and make them a cup of international roast and they'd be mic'd up and on air and harder to shift than a limpet. In those very early days, we were often very grateful for content. Today, during parliamentary sitting weeks, we add to the commentary, analysis and interviews with our political leaders and experts on the Sky News National Channel with simultaneous live channel feeds on our multi-view service and APAC, covering proceedings direct from the House of Representatives, the Senate estimates and House of Reps committee sessions. In fact, such has been the response from viewers that we recently began transmitting APAC 2 on our multi-view service, providing even more choice. We deliver politics filtered and unfiltered, live or replayed for catch-up. You choose. This is the sort of unique service that Sky News has made its own and will continue to stand us apart. So what does the future hold for 24-hour news and Sky News? This year, Columbia University in the US announced a combined journalism and computer science engineering degree. Wired.com said it had become increasingly clear that traditional newspaper-oriented skills were no longer enough to prepare students for the real world. Wired quoted a Columbia academic saying that journalists ask their IT departments for software that is not achievable, while the IT departments create computer programs that journalists won't use. We need a better bridge between the disciplines. That is a serious challenge for future journalists. In our experience at Sky News, the digital journalist of the future will not only need much deeper technology skills, they will still need those old-fashioned qualities of critical thinking, subject knowledge, and a nose for news that are instinctive and very hard, if not impossible, to teach. Sky News, I believe, is a fantastic training ground for young journalists. Experienced hands like Jim Whaley, Terry Willisey, Helen Daly, Lee Hatcher, and world-class producer Tom Krause are providing invaluable mentoring to the next generation of journalists who are developing on our team. There's been a lot of debate over the past year or so about the changing dynamics between public and private sector broadcasting. The issue was brought into tighter focus 18 months ago when we launched APAC, the Public Affairs Channel. APAC operates under its own independent charter on a not-for-profit basis, fully funded by Foxtel and Austar at no cost to taxpayers. Our critics had claimed APAC was the type of service Australia needed, but that the private sector would never provide, and that only a taxpayer-funded model could do it. Instead, APAC today is one of our proudest achievements and permanently established in our service lineup. We've additionally offered it to the government for transmission on digital free-to-air television. APAC has delivered more than 6,000 hours of Australian discussion and debate since we launched. Believe me, people do watch it. It's not just the pollies and their mums. We receive very lively feedback from viewers. With APAC, we're continuing to push into new areas. Sky News is committed to opening up Australia's legal system and its courts, and is advanced in trials, which we hope will one day lead to full coverage of court cases, or at the very least judgments. We are very encouraged by the in-principle support by some Chief Justices we've met with. A few months ago, Sky News and APAC announced the first international expansion of the channel, with the launch of our locally produced Australian Parliament program hosted by David Spears into the United States and Canada on their respective public affairs channels, C-SPAN and CPAC. This is the first regular public service broadcasting of any kind from Australia into North America, where C-SPAN and CPAC are available to more than 85% of homes in the US and more than 75% of homes in Canada, respectively. We added to this in April with a signing by Sky News of a landmark reciprocal programming agreement with China's national broadcaster, CCTV. Sky News secured an agreement for its programming to be broadcast into China, including daily business reports, while English language programming from CCTV has been broadcast into Australia on a weekly basis for the very first time. This is the beginning, not an ending, and we will develop more broadcasting links for the Sky News channels in other parts of the world. Our successful creation and development of APAC shows that public broadcasters need not be the automatic default choice for so-called public interest broadcasting in the future. I remain a strong believer in the value of introducing contestability into the provision of future broadcasting services on behalf of the government and taxpayers. The government applies contestability to other significant services it procures. Broadcasting should be exactly the same. A truly open contest to provide services such as the International Australian Network TV service for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade remains the best way for taxpayers to get the best service for the nation. A genuine tender that is operated publicly and transparently will only test new ideas, innovation and value. As I've said before, it's the outcome that matters, not whether the public or the private sector provides it. In closing, I want to stress again that Sky News is at heart about journalism, international, national and local in its outlook. We are a quintessential digital media business, delivering our services on TV, online and mobile devices, always with an eye to the future. One so far untapped territory for us is radio. Radio is a natural extension for Sky News, and it's an area that we are currently examining. Our strategic focus will continue to be on breaking boundaries with services like APAC, on investing and innovating in digital technology to boost choice and convenience for consumers with services like Sky News National, Sky News Business, Sky News Local, and on being different, with unique offerings like our 16 simultaneous television channel streams. Sky News changed the way Australians got their television news in 1996. We've come a long way, providing choice and empowering our subscribers to choose what they want when they want. In the process, I believe Sky News has changed journalism for the better. We've created new media diversity, we've created new jobs, we've created new ways of thinking about journalism and how to craft it, package it and deliver it. It is a pleasure to be here today to share my views with people whom I know are as passionate about journalism as I am. Thank you very much.
As is tradition, Angelo will now happily take some questions, and we'll take those from the floor with a couple of roving mics. John Ferguson, would you like to kick us off? So here it comes.
John Ferguson from the Herald Sun. You mentioned a line there about you live by the sword of the market. You mentioned the ABC and the role of the ABC. Do you believe that the ABC is overstepping its charter? And I know you've talked about this before, but I'd like you to expand on it. Overstepping its charter by moving into areas where the private sector is, well, grappling with moving into the 21st century of media. And I'd just like you to expand on it and talk more generally about it, if that's possible.
Look, it's an interesting area. We have no, in principle, objection to the ABC launching a 24-hour news channel. The issue I have is really in the way that it may be done. I particularly am concerned about certain things that the ABC has done with regards to some rights and going out and buying pay TV rights where clearly they don't have a pay TV business. And that's something that we're currently trying to work through with the ABC. But I think that it's one thing to operate in a competitive market. It's another thing for the ABC to use its position in the market to really quash commercial operators. And that really, we just want it to be a very level playing field, as it should be.
Thank you very much, Angelo, for a very interesting talk. My name's Ian Bence. I'm a retired timber merchant. Look, I'm a bit of a fan of Sky News. In fact, I've got a 60-inch plasma and I leave it on all day as I go back and forward and catch this and catch that.
Good to hear.
But I'd just like to make a couple of points if I can. I really think it's Sky News and politics, because there's a serious political bias to Sky News and its reporting, and David Spears is so fantastic. But also sport. And can I just say, I don't like watching sport. I play a lot of sport myself, but I hate watching it. But I love Sky News and politics. And so my heckles go up when suddenly on comes quarter of an hour or half an hour of sport, and I've got to change the channel or go and find something else to do. So is it possible that you might separate Sky News and maybe have Sky News Politics or Sky News Sport so that I can be happy and watch 24 hours of news politics, mate?
You know what? We'll do it straight away. In fact, we already do it. If you grab your remote control and press red, you'll be able to access Sky News Multiview, where you can actually choose a 24-hour sports news channel and choose to watch replays of our agenda programs and the Nation program and so on. So that's exactly what we do. We actually provide you with the choice to watch what you want, when you want. But that's good feedback. I will feed that back to our sports team. I'm sure that they'll be thrilled to hear that. Now look, really, ultimately our national channel really is there to provide a service to all Australians. So it will be a mix of sport and business and general news and politics. And that's the beauty of what we offer with our 16 streams. You can actually choose the channel you want to watch when you want to watch.
Hello. Hi, I'm Alex Wake from RMIT University. And first of all, thank you so much. You've employed one of our graduates this year, so thank you for that and for
Our pleasure.
increasing the job market. My question, however, is about you taking on the ABC and particularly the international broadcasting realm. Mark Scott talks a lot about soft diplomacy and how important it is for a public broadcaster to take on that role. I just wonder, if you're a Sky broadcaster that's concerned in the bottom line, how can we trust you with our national interests to betray us overseas? How would you respond to that?
Well, the way that the Australian network contract works, it's in fact a network that is contracted from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and has very specific KPIs and it's got a contract that actually associated with it. And the ABC operates it to the terms of that contract. I cannot see how there would be any difference between us operating that service in accordance with a contract compared to the ABC. And in fact, I'd go one step further in that the ABC can sometimes find itself conflicted, I think, as any national broadcaster could. Because on the one hand, you've got a contract that is being supplied under under arrangement with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade with the specific aim of diplomatic relations internationally, and yet there is a charter that also overlays on top of that too. We would operate the Australian network as a separate entity to Sky News. It would operate strictly in accordance with what the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade wanted to achieve out of that channel, and I don't see any conflict there for us at all. In fact, as I said, in many ways we are better placed to provide that service to DFAT than any national broadcaster.
Leo D'Angelo Fisher from BRW magazine. Two questions. Firstly, may I have a job with you? I wonder, would Sky have run the David Campbell story? And do you have any views about what airing that story means for standards of journalism in Australia?
It's a very good question. We did run the story. We ran the story once it was out in the public domain. I'm not aware of what decision making was undertaken or what information the broadcaster, Channel 7, who initially broadcast that story, had. So it's very difficult for me to comment because they made a decision on the basis of what they knew, and that was their call. I think it's a very tricky question for journalists, but unless you're in that position, you have the information to work with, it would be a very difficult decision to make. That said, I know that certainly the response that we got from viewers was quite negative, and I think that we, just as journalists, need to be mindful of the fact that it's a very sophisticated environment out there, and people are willing to make their own minds up on things. And I think that it's very difficult to make a decision without having been in that position with information that obviously they had.
Just as a follow-up question to that, if I may, if Sky News had had that information, would it have broadcast that story?
If Channel 9 had information, would Channel 9 have broadcast that story? I mean, it's a difficult... And without knowing what the information was, and without having obviously they had information that was very specific to that video being taken. It's a very, very tricky area because I wasn't there and I wasn't party to the decision-making process. That said, I do acknowledge it's a very, very tricky question to answer in that editorial environment in the newsroom. And I think, it's one of the toughest ones I think journalists would face in an editorial meeting, I would have thought.
Angelo, David Polton from Inter-Elson. Thank you for your talk today. Particularly pick up on the remarks you made about the potential televising of court proceedings, which I think would be an excellent move because there is so little understanding amongst indeed many sections of the media, let alone the public, about the way the courts actually work, as we're seeing at the moment with the law and order debate. And any increase in the information would be helpful. Could you perhaps just expand on what you see as the barriers? You mentioned the in-principle support, but clearly there are still barriers there, and perhaps predict how long it might be before we are regularly seeing court proceedings broadcast on television.
Look, we believe very strongly in the same way that we've opened up the parliamentary process by providing a channel dedicated to the coverage of parliamentary proceedings, that the same can be achieved for the courts. I think that there is value, and the way that we believe coverage of courts should be, that there is value in actually unlocking the mysteries, if you like, of a court case. All too often, journalism in court proceedings really is a case of you cover day one, you come back for the verdict, and that's very difficult to get context. So look, in terms of timeline, we're undertaking a trial very shortly. I think we have to prove the concept, and we need to get the judges on side so that they understand and feel comfortable with the concept. This is not about being intrusive. This is not court TV from the United States. This is very much the same principle that we would apply to the coverage of parliamentary proceedings. It's non-invasive. It's providing context by providing plenty of airtime, and not just by doing half-hour summary programs of 3 weeks of complex proceedings. But look, I would hope that it'll be sooner rather than later before we see some court proceedings on air. And in fact, we have already broadcast some court proceedings, but not in entirety, which is what we would like to achieve. All done? Great.
Would you please thank Angelos Frangopoulos?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.